Football is a way of life.
This is football, chump. All you gotta do when a man gets the ball is tackle him. Get it? The man with the ball. Bring him down.
Football is about controlling that anger, harnessing that aggression into a team effort to achieve perfection. You fumble the football, and I will break my foot off in your John Brown hind parts. And then you will run a mile.
You block about as good as a jelly donut. You know that?
People can learn a great deal from a skillfully played football game.
What civilized person would play a game with the skin of an innocent pig?
Dad!
Let's talk about playing football.
Here's Danger Dean with the BNW in the PNW.
Welcome back, another week of the Broncos Northwest podcast. My name is Danger Dean. Thank you so much for joining me. You may have noticed a little bit of an absence last week. I'll get to that here in just a little bit. However, if you'd like to reach out to the show, I've got a number of ways you can do so. Of course, social media. We've all got social media, right? At the BNW podcast, or you can search for us right there in the search bar. Want to shoot me an email? You can do so at broncosnorthwestpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can always give me a call at 731-4DANGER. Actually, you can call or text. Just make sure you leave a message. We'll make sure to feature your comment, your opinion on the show. Also want to shout out a couple other podcasts. This one near and dear to my heart because, well, I host it alongside my tag team partner in the professional wrestling world, JD Mason, available on all platforms. If you're a wrestling fan or just simply a fan of podcasts, if you're looking for something new, it's Tackle Drop Down Podcast. Very fun, very entertaining. Yeah, give us some support. Now, I did mention a little bit of a hiatus last week. I did not have a show. The week before, I was actually out in Colorado wrestling because that is what I do on the side, a professional wrestler. So I dealt with that. But then when I got home, I had a lot of technical difficulties and obstacles. Okay, I'll be honest with you. Let me just be 100% transparent. I'm still a student. I'm on the older side of things. I'm 39 years old. I just celebrated a birthday. But I am a student, so I have gotten completely behind in my schoolwork, so I was getting caught up last week, and I did successfully, which is why I wasn't able to put out a show. If you care, I'm caught up, so that's why we're back. I will have to also say, going back to Colorado, which is where I grew up. I moved there when I was 6. I moved away 3 years ago, so I'm very familiar with Colorado. I've dealt with a lot of new places since I've moved away. Obviously, I lived in Florida for a little bit. Now I live in Washington State. That means there's a lot of different time changes I've had to deal with and get used to. 3 different time zones I've lived in. And I will say that being in Colorado, it's just an hour off. Colorado's an hour ahead from Washington State, and it ruined me for like a week. And I thought Washington was actually doing away with daylight savings. Wasn't that a thing? I want it to be a thing. I'm all for darker, colder months. And this is an unpopular opinion. I'm full of them. I hate the summer. I hate the heat. And that's kind of why Washington State has been perfect for me. It's very temperate. If you've never been here, temperate weather all year long. It doesn't really get hotter than 80, 85 degrees in the summer. You've got your days, but on average. And then in the winter, it doesn't really get any colder than 40 degrees as well. Again, you've got your days. That's why it's worked out so well for me here. I go back to Colorado, man. It's just so dry and hot. It wasn't so hot when I went back. They actually had just gotten over a snowstorm. So the temperature was actually perfect. But I went back in the summertime and it was just almost unbearable. I mean, I love you, Colorado, but you heat. Not a big fan. Probably why we separated, the state and I. All right, busy couple of weeks with free agency and the Denver Broncos. Let's get into it.
Sound off. 731-4-DANGER.
Been a long 2 weeks. Been a busy 2 weeks. Where do we start?
And now, the bad news.
Seems like a good place. Let's start with one of the biggest non-free agency news that kind of concerns the Denver Broncos. Deshaun Watson and his sexual assault allegations kind of came out of left field, and then once it started, it was like a snowball effect. It just kept getting bigger and bigger and bigger. Right now, the number at the time of this recording is up to 16 women that have accused the quarterback of sexual assault on several different occasions. And some of this stuff is really hard to read. I'm not going to get into the details here. If you want to know, the information is out there for anyone that wants to find it on their own, but it doesn't look good for Watson. At this point, the Broncos, I'm sure, have moved on from the idea that he's a potential candidate for the quarterback job in Denver. Of course, he'll have his day in court. It's just really hard to believe that this many women are making false accusations, in my opinion. I also find it really hard to believe that the Broncos would still have any interest given these accusations. That leaves the position with a huge question mark right now. And we're going to get into more quarterback talk here in just a bit.
Free agency frenzy.
And it has been busy. Officially, Phillip Lindsay is no longer a Denver Bronco. He signed with the Texans. So maybe Phillip Lindsay isn't looking to win right now. Not quite the team you would think he would go to if he was looking to win. Maybe more so looking for that payday. And it seems like the Broncos are just connected at the hip with Houston right now, right? I mean, with all the Deshaun Watson talk, J.J. Watt, briefly, I guess, in his free agency, there was talk of possibly grabbing him in Denver. Just a lot of Houston Texans, Denver Broncos related activity going on. I would say that was a shocking landing spot for me. I figured he would have gone somewhere like the Patriots or somewhere in the AFC West. Like, what if he ended up on the Chiefs? I would have cried. I would have cried big, ugly, gross tears if something like that were to happen. But they found his replacement. The Broncos signed running back Mike Boone. Played with the Cardinals last season. Another explosive player. Obviously, that is who they're looking at to fill Lindsay's shoes. And as of right now, that running back room is starting to look complete. I guess we could put a little question mark above complete. Maybe not fully. You know they're going to look for something within the draft. But right now, Melvin Gordon, you've got Mike Boone, and don't forget, Royce Freeman is still part of the team in whatever aspect they would be willing to play him. But I do think they're going to add another piece in the draft. My guess. Also, a few changes on the horizon. The league recently announced that the 2021 season would be a 17-game season going forward, which I'm all on board for, right? Like, as a fan, what else would be better than one more game during the season? One more week of football. I don't think anybody would be too upset about that. As a fan, the players, not as happy as the fans are about having to play an extra game. Alvin Kamara took his frustration to Twitter. He tweeted out, quote, expletive dumb as hell. And I know he speaks for a good chunk of the players in the league. Obviously, they're not excited about adding on to their workload. You also have to imagine that perhaps maybe the players want to be paid a little bit more for having to play an extra game. Whatever the case might be, the players aren't too happy about it, but the change will be in effect in this upcoming season. Kareem Jackson, that's an interesting story. He was a free agency casualty, right? Like the Broncos, they signed cornerback Kyle Fuller. That was a big signing. Fuller played last season with the Bears. He played with Vic Fangio when Fangio was part of the Bears as well. Huge free agency get for Denver. 1 year, $9.5 million. They also picked up another hotshot cornerback from Washington, Ronald Darby, mentioned that briefly on the last episode. Then the Broncos and Kareem Jackson were able to agree on a number, and he will be back on the team. And this is a move that I'm really excited for. I was really bummed when I found out that Jackson would be leaving the team. I liked his presence. If you follow him on social media or even on YouTube, he's got his own kind of flow to him, and it kind of how he reminds me of another Von Miller type. Big personality. And that also means an amazing locker room guy. So to me, that was kind of a bummer that they were going to let him go. But they came up with a number they can agree on. So we get Kareem Jackson for at least another year in Denver. And the Broncos weren't done with their defensive back strategy. Justin Simmons, that's the big splash, the big free agency splash, and almost unsuspected. Of course, they hit him with the tag, but it was kind of assumed that it would take up until the summer, maybe before training camp, to get something done. Turns out they didn't want to waste the time. They wanted to get it done as soon as possible. 4 years, $61 million. I can't even believe I'm saying this. The Broncos taking care of their own free agents. Benjamin Albright actually broke that news. So between Simmons, Vaughn, and Shelby, I'm starting to feel a little more confidence with this front office, manned by George Paton. Simmons, another leader. Now this defense really starting to look stout, starting to look big. Their weakness last season, it was depth, especially at the corner position. Now that seems to be one of the stronger points of the team. Troy Rank on Twitter likened them to the no-fly zone of the Manning days. And how amazing would that be to get a resurgence at the defense? An area that Vic Fangio was supposed to make legendary when he got to Denver. So is 2021 the season it happens? Remember, the Broncos proved it once. If the defense can suffocate the opposing offense, the quarterback play doesn't need to be the star of the show. Just need a game manager. Granted, Peyton was one of the best, or if not the best you could possibly find, but that eases the pressure of finding a hotshot quarterback, at least for the time being. So that brings me back to the biggest question mark, the biggest problem on the team, and that is the quarterback position. And get ready. This is going to be the conversation until the first snap of the 2021 season. Where do the Broncos go from here? Again, Watson assumedly no longer a candidate. And remember, after all the moves the Broncos just made, they still have plenty of cap space. So what do? Sign a quarterback? Starting to sound like they may be looking to the draft. Both George Paton and Mike Shula, the quarterback's coach, have been making rounds during different pro days, basically getting a bird's eye view of the available talent to lead the helm. The options starting to dwindle, starting to narrow just a little bit. I'm still in the mindset that the Broncos aren't getting a superstar. They're going to see what they have in Drew Lock, which Denver fans, they've been clamoring for this kind of thing. And I think about Paxton Lynch. He wasn't given the chance to properly develop, regardless of what anyone says or feels about him and his work ethic. It was bad, don't get me wrong. But for where he was drafted, I think a little bit more should have been invested into him and his play, or building a team around him, in my opinion. Or just don't draft him, or see if you can get him later. What they're doing now seemingly is building a team around Drew Lock. And I think a little consistency might be what the team needs. And maybe I'm being optimistic when I think about it or say that, but I do feel that if you get him with a full season with this coaching staff, no big changes to the coaching staff, mind you, I think we see a drastic improvement. And I think Broncos fans should be extremely excited about that. Then I start thinking about the next stop in the offseason. That's the draft. That tells me that the draft is where the team is going to go to find Drew Lock's backup, rather than a veteran. I mean, which veterans are out there? There's not many left. Gardner Minshew, that was a name that I've seen brought up, and I actually kind of like the sound of that, with the caveat that it would go against everything that I've said about bringing in competition to elevate Drew Lock. This could create a situation where Gardner would just straight beat him out. And can the team handle another season of quarterback unfamiliarity? I don't think so. It's also worth noting that before Mitch Trubisky was sent to the Bills, he was interested in coming to Denver. So all Denver really would have had to do is make a deal, and Trubisky would be a Denver Bronco. However, according to Benjamin Albright, the Broncos weren't mutually interested, content with what they have when you add someone like Mitch Trubisky into the mix. So I go back to my instincts, which is all I've got. I have no sources. My instincts, they say draft a quarterback. Hopefully not in the first round. Or if they do, maybe they trade back into the first to possibly grab one. I just think the Broncos should use that number 9 pick on a defensive player, a linebacker, more specifically. I think there's a kid from Penn State that's had a killer pro day. I'm not too familiar with college football. Seen a lot of it on Twitter. And Fangio is licking his chops to get a guy like that. So you grab one of these guys from the draft and you develop Drew Lock. You're kind of already starting to do that. I think at this point, I'm all in for seeing Lock go forward. Not because he blew me away with his play, but because I really cannot handle the idea of the Broncos doing this again in another year. Give it a chance with a proper offseason and see what the kid can do with a healthy, improved roster. Hard to say what happens without Elway heading the draft board this year, which is another big factor into what we can expect come April. Lots to come in the next few weeks. Will a quarterback be one of them? I don't think so. We could start thinking about the draft and something I know absolutely nothing about, and that's college prospects. If you've got any insight on the draft or some of these prospects that are coming into the draft, please call or text in, leave a message, 731-4-DANGER. We'll make sure you get the proper credit.
The closest he's ever been to the game is this show. It's the BNW Podcast with Danger Dean.
What's been the biggest and or most shocking move during free agency? For me, the most shocking move was re-signing Kareem Jackson. I mean, we all pretty much thought he was gone. Hell, the team basically told us he was gone when they said they weren't going to tender him. Then, bam, team-friendly deal, which shows he wants to be in Denver. And that bodes well for a defense that's looking to rebound after a litany of injuries ruined some of the team's aspirations in 2020. Getting a proven player to take a deal like this, that's a good sign for the Broncos and maybe how much the rest of the league is starting to look at them again. Maybe some people are laughing at the Broncos, but there's a good chunk of people that are genuinely interested in what's going on in Denver. What about you? What do you think? Jordan, biggest, he said Justin Simmons long-term. Also Vaughn Stang, Darby, and Kyle Fuller. Those are huge because that took this defense from, where it was. It wasn't a terrible defense, but it did bring it up another level. Because now you've got a guy like Simmons who's going to have that extra fire after getting that money that he's been working so hard to get. You've got proven players with Darby and Fuller, and of course Vaughn. Him staying in the locker room, that speaks for itself. That is a monster move. He says most shocking, Lindsey gone. Very sad. And I go back to what I've said before. The Broncos just really have not taken care monetarily, so to speak, of their running back room, especially the ones they draft. Those guys always seem to wear out their rookie deals, and then it's off to free agency land. Kyle, friend of the show, he said, I don't think we've had any real shocking losses. Lindsey is only a loss because he was a local kid who was an undrafted free agent that hit it big, but he didn't fit the style of offense and couldn't find the end zone inside the 20. I think overall the free agency period has been really good and telling as to what our draft position will be. It's also telling that we have fixed major areas that might be addressed at the 9 spot, allowing us to continue the rumored quote-unquote big trade for a quarterback or the flexibility to move down and pick up some additional mid-round picks. Kyle says nothing too shocking, but productive and satisfying nonetheless. Let's go to the phone, 731-4-DANGER. A text from Tuck, my boy. He said, signed Kareem Jackson, woohoo. I think we have a very exciting team all of a sudden. The only piece that still needs to be figured out is competition for Drew Lock. And honestly, I don't think he even really needs that much competition. I bet he feels the pressure already because there's a lot of hype around who is the quarterback of the future for the Denver Broncos. I agree with you. I think right now the hot seat is hotter than ever. Let's see how he can handle that kind of pressure. Because if he comes out guns a-blazing in the 2021 season, how good does he look? How good does the rest of the team look going forward? Tuck goes on. Also, Vic Fangio should be feeling pressure now because he has no excuse to lose, barring any injuries, of course, and the other elite quarterbacks that are playing in our division. I'm actually excited to watch us go up against them and not feel nervous about getting blown out like we have in the past. Bring it on, Mahomes. That just gave me goosebumps. I'm not going to lie. Thanks so much for the text, man. I think next year is going to be a big year for the team. I think because of COVID and all of the restrictions that the team were up against and were facing. And again, at such a young stage, most of the team, and if I'm correct, the Broncos are the youngest team in the league, age-wise. So if they have a full season together to gel, and I'll tell you what, there's a lot that can be said about a team that comes together after such a brutal run like the Broncos have had the last few years. This team's feeling the pressure to turn it around, and let's hope that that pressure turns them into diamonds, baby. Let's get into it. You've got your opinion. I want to hear it. Assignment Broncos Country. With Deshaun Watson seemingly out of the trade picture and free agency cleaning up many of the available free agents, where should the Broncos start to look for a quarterback? The draft? You want them to find somebody? Let's reevaluate and see what we can come up with. Again, you can hit the social media pages, Facebook, Instagram, Twitter, all at the B&W Podcast. You can shoot me an email at broncosnorthwestpodcast@gmail.com. And of course, you can always give me a call and leave a message or shoot me a text message at 731-4-DANGER. That's 731, the number 4-DANGER. And I'll share your opinion here on the show. As always, my name is Danger Dean for the Broncos Northwest Podcast. Thanks so much for hanging out. Until next time, bye.